Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Cariani, Executive Director of the WGBH Archives and WGBH Project Director for the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. I'm hosting a conversation today for the 5 for 5 Conversations on 5 Years of Digitizing Hidden Collections for CLIR. The title of this hosted discussion is Successful Partnerships Lead to Successful Collaborations. And you will hear from participants from 4 different CLIR Digitizing Hidden Collection projects that will discuss their collaborations and partnerships. The 4 projects are in different stages of completion, from completely done to just starting out. All are collaborations with the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, or the AAPB, as you will hear it referred. The partnerships vary from statewide consortiums in Kansas and New Mexico to a radio station in New York City to a national news program, and the collaboration between the Library of Congress and WGBH for the American Archive. The discussion will cover the benefits and complications of the partnership. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation, and thank you so much for CLIR, for the Digitizing Hidden Collections program, and for the ability for us to have this discussion. Thank you. We have here today representatives from several AAPB Hidden Collections projects funded by CLIR. They'll all introduce themselves and their projects to start off, and then we'll have a facilitated discussion with questions. So why don't we start with Chris, since Chris is the project that has completed.
Sounds good. I'm Chris Alexander, Senior Director of Media Assets for WETA's PBS NewsHour. It's part of a large project to digitize all of our programs from 1975 through 2007, and to get those programs available to all kinds of people on AAPB's fantastic site, to make all kinds of that material available to researchers, scholars, and actually, as an added benefit to our own production team, it was a tremendously involved, very collaborative process with AAPB and the Library of Congress, and it turned out to be a really great project with a lot of tremendous benefits, particularly in terms of access to our amazing collection of programming, decades and decades worth of programming, to all kinds of different people. And as a result, we've seen a tremendous increase in interest in our program and in the past. And what we've done, from interest in licensing of content to just as importantly, if not more importantly, research and information about what has happened in the world for basically close to 50 years now. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, we also received, as part of the process, digitized files of 7,000 tapes that otherwise were essentially deteriorating in storage. Those tapes have now become, or those files have now become a very important part of our production process, speeding up production, making all that material available to folks in production very quickly. And that, in turn, has increased the amount of context we can add to current day production and current day editorial about what's happening in the world. So all in all, Hidden Collections has been a tremendous benefit to our own production. More importantly, it's enabled the NewsHour to be of tremendous benefit to all kinds of folks all over the world, really. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chris. And we'll go to Vincent now as a project that is in process and coming to an end.
Yes, nearing the end, hopefully soon. Yes. My name is Vincent Kelley. I'm the archivist at the Riverside Church. And I was actually brought on originally as the project manager for this grant project, Public Radio as a Tool for Cultural Engagement in New York in the 60s and early 70s, where we're digitizing the broadcasts of WRVR FM. WRVR FM was also known as Riverside Radio, was a public radio station from 1961 to 1971 that broadcast out of the Riverside Church Tower to the New York City area, and broadcast educational material, broadcast services of worship, and also broadcast a lot of jazz music. Some of the important programming that we had in WRVR was some of the exciting things that we've sort of recovered and found is speeches by MLK at Riverside, some of which were previously believed to be lost. A documentary series about the Birmingham campaign in 1963, as well as interviews with artists and poets like Robert Frost and John Ashbery and Allen Ginsberg. So it was a really broad spectrum of material that has been, basically buried away in the back of this archive for decades now, and it's finally coming to light, and it's really increased the amount of research that is being done into this material, and I think is really expanding kind of the access that researchers have to public radio material in New York in the 1960s, and information about sort of how the public media treated the civil rights movement, and as well as one of the other important shows that was on there was Just Jazz, featuring Ed Beach, which was sort of a pioneering jazz radio show and sort of set the format for jazz radio. So it's a really broad spectrum of material, and yeah, it's been so exciting to be able to bring all these. It's about 3,000 audio tapes, about 4,000 hours of programming. We currently have about 3,002 files have been returned and put into the AAPB archive, and we actually are sort of hoping to continue a little bit with the same process and with our same vendor, because we have a much larger audio collection, which includes older sermons from the church as well as later material. There was an era of about 5 years where the radio station was a commercial radio station, where some of the same shows that had been on the public radio continued. And so we're hoping that we can digitize and archive those as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So now let's go to Debra to talk about a project starting up, statewide collaboration project.
So it does feel like we're just getting started, although I believe I've been talking to Casey for 2.5 years, something like that. So there's a lot of conversation that goes into starting these collaboratives if you try to make it as big as we did. And so when we were first contacted, when Casey first called and said, hey, we just noticed that there really isn't much Kansas representation in the AAPB collection. Would you like to participate in this? Of course, my answer to everything is yes. And then I thought, since I have come to Kansas, I had only been here for a couple of years at the time. I came here from Houston, where I was used to everything is bigger and grander. And here, there are a lot of stations in Kansas that are very small and have incredibly limited resources. So I've having arrived in Kansas, I've been working to get Kansas more on the map and in the conversation, the national conversation, and it's been working really well in a bunch of areas. And I thought this is another way to do that. This is another way to make sure that Kansas is represented well, and not just today in like today's politics, but also in the past 70 years. And so it was convenient and very helpful that in Kansas, we have an organization called the Kansas Public Broadcasting Council. And so it is a group of the general managers from all the stations, radio and television. And I happen to be chair of the organization at the time. So when it comes to how'd you put it together, boy, did I luck out. I mean, that made a big difference. But I went into it with great enthusiasm to get Kansas represented. I mean, then you can't tell a better story to someone other than Kansas isn't there. Come on, we have to tell this story. So we're really excited. We are very early, even though it was a long process getting here. We still have a long way to go, but we're excited about where it's going to go. We have lots of piles of very grungy things coming that we're starting to gather from around the state, and you just never know what you're going to find.
Great, thank you. And Michael, another project that is launching. It's another state collaboration across New Mexico.
Yes, thanks very much, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we have here, which is our New Mexico Public Media Digitization Project. About 3 years ago, Karen showed up in our conference room and talked about this, and it just was, the light bulb went off, because for so many years we've been thinking a lot about this, what I call not a hidden collection, but hidden treasure. In our archives, which is up in lofts, and I know different stations have the same kind of thing where they've kind of prized these stories that they've told, and they've kind of kept putting them in places for safekeeping, but at the same time, they didn't have well, certainly in our case, we didn't have the resources, which include money, time, people, to really adequately deal with reworking these hidden collections into something that would be viable once again. New Mexico is an amazing place. I originally from the East Coast, I came out here in the early 80s, but it's just remarkable. There's 19 different pueblos. There's a long-term Hispanic, colonial, and current Hispanic communities. There's a very thriving Vietnamese community. It's one of the most amazing stories we have here is that we were one of the refugee sites for the Vietnamese people when they left after the fall of Vietnam, after the fall of Saigon. The stories are just amazing, and I think are still very much a part and an important part of our, not only our history, but part of our ongoing dialogue that we continue to have. I am not an archivist. I am an executive producer. I love stories. I'm really interested in telling stories. And we have decades of these stories, as I was saying, hidden away in lofts. KUNM, one of our partners who's a radio station, had all their old radio tapes with Dick Gregory and people like that sitting in a men's room on the 3rd floor. We were all in kind of the same boat. And then, of course, with Karen's help and then Casey's partnership joining in, we were able to move forward, and we're in our 1st year of the grant. And I couldn't be more thrilled. Bringing these stories back, they'll continue to inform and inspire us. I don't think we would have been able to do this without the CLIR funding. Thank you very much. Also would not have been able to do it without AAPB. I'll finish up with this recurring vision I have of, it's like a Buster Keaton movie. I think you're probably familiar with, he's standing by a railroad track and this train goes zipping by, and he reaches out his arm and grabs onto the last car and gets pulled along. And that train is AAPB, and it's driven by Karen and Casey. And I'm holding on for dear life, but they've been just right at the heart of this thing and making this possible, and I can't thank them enough.
Oh, well, thank you. And Rachel, too, from the Library of Congress. She is managing all of our preservation files. And I have to say, the AAPB would not exist if we didn't have this partnership with the Library of Congress. Preservation needs are just so inherent. So Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself and your role?
Sure. I'm Rachel Curtis. I'm a digital project specialist at the Library of Congress, and I'm the project coordinator for the AAPB for the library. I work out at the National Audiovisual Conservation Center, which is in Culpeper, Virginia, about 70 miles south of DC. And the library operates as the preservation arm of the American Archives. So all of the preservation files that are generated through all of these projects are sent to the library. I do basically QC, quality control checks, make sure that the files look good, ingest them into our system, our archive at NAVCC, and they are preserved for posterity. We're really focused on long-term preservation. So every 3 to 5 years, we do migration of the content. We verify that nothing has been corrupted. We have backups at offsite locations. So the material is really secure, and it's being preserved long-term as well. And another really great thing about this this collaboration is that with the Riverside project, we were able to sort of give back. We had a lot of the Ed Beach programs. They had been donated to us, I believe in like the 90s. And we had an inventory, but it was being stored at an offsite storage facility. And it was great. When that project came up, it was a great opportunity to get that material digitized and to sort of give it back to its home. It had been donated by Ed Beach, actually, to the library. And then we were able to give it back to Riverside, which was great, and get them digitized. It's a great program. And the library also has a large collection of PBS and NET material. NET is the precursor to PBS. And so through this collaboration, we've also been able to, we've digitized our own content that we hold at the library, and we give access copies to WGBH for inclusion on the website. So it's great. I especially love that the old NET programs are great, and I love finally being able to see them easily. You know, being sort of the preservation arm, we deal with the preservation files, which are very large. They're not meant to be viewed. You know, you can always come on site to the library to view everything in the collection, but with WGBH's help, it's now online, and you can view about half the collection online from anywhere, which is great. The more people that get to see this stuff the better.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Casey, who has probably written 3/4 of most of these grants and certainly have helped get people over that last hump of getting the funding and keeping the project rolling forward and keeping everybody connected. So Casey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Davis-Kaufman. I'm the Associate Director of the GBH Archives and Project Manager for the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, or AAPB. And along with Karen and Rachel, I've had the honor of working across all of these projects and working with all of these folks in developing the projects and implementing them and seeing them through to completion. I love working with the stations and folks at NewsHour and at Riverside on the developing of the proposals, because we are able to bring kind of the archival expertise and the expertise in project design and the technical preservation piece and the access piece. But the folks at the stations bring that long history and that long knowledge of what's in these collections and the value and significance of making them available to the public again. And you know, one example is just working with Michael on the New Mexico project. You had all of these ideas about the local outreach, working with the public libraries, working with the public schools, developing resources through PBS learning media that we wouldn't have envisioned, and we wouldn't have been able to do kind of at our national level. So you having those close ties with your community, I think, is what makes these collaborative projects even more impactful, both on the national scale and at the local level. And in Kansas, you all, I know, are working on reaching out to your communities to see, you know, what producers have retired, what folks recorded stuff off air. And that local outreach, I think, is going to, again, make the projects even more successful and ensure that everything out there is preserved, not just what's been sitting on the shelves in the stations. So I have just loved working across all of these projects and getting to work with all of these folks on the call, and also with Rachel. You know, we work closely every day on ingesting material, making decisions about preservation and access, and obviously with Karen and Alan too, leading the AAPB initiative. So I will stop there and let's get on with the discussion.
Great, thank you guys. So most of the questions and discussion will focus around the partnerships and the collaborations and how they came about. And what's worked, what's not worked, hindsight, foresight, and all those things. So why don't we start off? The first question I had was, who would you consider a collaborator and a partner within your project? For example, would you consider your vendor a partner, a collaborator, just a vendor? And how are those relationships built, and what's important in order to engage them or to keep them going? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. So, our collaborators, partners, and when I think of vendor, I really think of George Blood Audiovisual, who who digitized the entire collection, really. So LOC, AAPB, George Blood, all of us were really collaborators, partners, vendor, if you will, on this project. So, and to that degree, we all worked so closely together on this project on a really often daily basis when we really were in the weeds with all of this. It was critical. And I was talking with our archivist yesterday about this, that, there was a period there for a little while where we all were communicating to some degree more than I was communicating with some of the folks at the NewsHour on a regular basis. So, those partnerships were really critical. Those collaborations were critical. They're all one and the same, particularly when you have such a interesting combination of so many factors. You have data, you have tape, you have analog meets digital. You have a lot of sleuthing, if you will, finding the media, which media, as you alluded, which media is going to work, which tapes work. Then we realize sometimes that the material we had sent is not the material that is going to work. We aren't going to be able to use it. So then it's the magic search for that other version somewhere. So, so I really, as I thought about this, our collaborators and partners and vendor, all the same, truly collaborative process for us.
Who else? Who else wants to jump in?
I can go. I actually had a very similar feeling to Chris of feeling almost like I'm more of a coworker with Casey and with Rachel, and as well Rebecca and Miranda also at WGBH, because I probably see them more often than I see a lot of the other people I work with at Riverside Church. And about the vendor, we use a vendor, Memnon Archiving Services, or Memnon, and at Sony, and I'm not sure I communicate with them nearly as much as I do with my WGBH and Library of Congress colleagues. So I think we see them a little bit more as a vendor. But I also think that there's been other collaborators and partners outside of that original setup that have brought so much to the project, of other people that we've sort of met along the way or contacted about the material that we've preserved, that have become really vital to what the project has become. There's been, part of one of the great benefits of having this collaboration with Casey and with Rachel is their expertise, and they can really kind of hold my hand a little bit and walk me through everything. And so that leaves me a little bit of time and space to focus on the material itself and to reach out to other people who might be interested in the material. So we've developed lots of really interesting partnerships and collaborations with outside groups, not only just contacting people whose family worked at the radio station and them being so excited by the material and even giving us more donations, giving us more tapes to be able to add to the collection, and just other paraphernalia, other, you know, materials that they have related to the radio station, but also, you know, other organizations. We reached out to the King Institute about all of our MLK tapes, and they were so excited about it, and they also referred us to other people. We had some recordings of the March on Washington that were produced by one of our reporters, and we reached out to Time Magazine to tell them about this, and Time Magazine actually was in the middle of producing a VR experience based on the March on Washington, and they ended up using a lot of the audio material from our recordings, our field recordings at the March on Washington to kind of create the soundscape in this VR experience. So there's been all these other exciting partnerships and collaborations that have sort of just arisen out of the material and out of, you know, me being able to have a little time, because I'm not focusing on all the intricate details and all the technical details every day, 24/7. I can also sort of do this outreach that kind of brings other partnerships and collaborations in, and that's been one of the very fun and very exciting part of the project.
Oh, great. Now, Debra and Michael, you guys haven't quite gotten to the point where you've been working closely with a vendor. So, but you're both statewide consortiums. So can you talk about your partners within the states and how you chose them, how you convinced them to come on board? I know, Debra, you've got 6 other stations, I think, as part of your collaboration. So, and Michael, you've got 3, 4, 5. So you both have quite a bit. So Debra, do you want to kind of start? How did you get these stations to come on board and go for it?
Well, first I had to learn a whole lot from our collaborators, AAPB and Library of Congress. So not having had those teams to lay this all out, and then like the AAPB team having more than one of you on that call, you know, like Karen have a certain perspective and Casey have a different, and that was really, that helped me gather the sort of the language. And then the collaboration of Library of Congress was really critical in telling the story to these other stations too. And so I invited every public station, radio and television in Kansas, to participate. And one large TV station in Kansas City had already done this independently. They're actually based in Missouri. So that's okay. And we kind of went around the state and we all talked about it as a group, talked about the benefits as a group, and we talked about the benefits individually. There were concerns about rights. There were concerns about future revenue and things that I had to turn and run back to AAPB with questions just pretty constantly. I can remember more than once at about 10 o'clock at night thinking, I wonder if it's too late. I really need to know. I just don't. What time zone are they in again? I got it. Because in order to gather the partners, it really required the early collaboration. And so that part has been quite key. It feels like there's this whole extra step in there of now, yes, they've agreed and yes, they've signed, deeds of gift, but now we have to actually do this. And so we're now at the point where we're about to go to those stations and gather the tape, and some of them are very excited and some of them are like, oh, kind of busy now, pandemic, got a little going on. So it's a challenge. So I found myself back in that telling the story place. And I'm very excited that the idea of collaboration has now spread from our archivist as he talks in the community. He's very well connected in the local arts community, and they're having conversations now, and we're encouraging it and going to do a lot more about, hey, why don't we preserve our stuff? Oh, well, we could preserve our stuff. And those are different sized organizations. So maybe we're thinking maybe we can help help some more there. So I love that it's starting to inspire others beyond public broadcasting.
Oh, awesome. That's great. Michael, how about you?
Sure. A lot of what Vincent has talked about, a lot of what Debra has talked about, I certainly resonate with, and it's very much part of our story. Building on that, we have a statewide partnership. We are working with the public media, leading TV and radio stations. I think what really cemented the partnership was good old-fashioned money. We're all on the limit as far as resources go. I mean, in every TV radio station here, everybody's pretty much has dedicated resources. So knowing that going in, Casey and I worked very closely on the budget, and the thing that we chose to do, and I think it's one of the smarter things that we've done, is to have funds available to have a project archivist and coordinator. And so that person comes online, and they're here at KNME, or New Mexico PBS, and they are a 2-year appointment. And we got them a big room to work in with a lot of space. And they are basically following up on what Casey and I proposed with the partners, and got the partners to commit to, in that they prioritized certain elements of their collection, and we eventually came up with about 9,000 items. And this position is now there to do the wrangling, to do the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute work that it's going to take to get these 9,000 items not only wrangled from the partners, but get them digitized, get the metadata put in. And my conversations with Casey the other day about metadata are still, just kind of rattling around in my brain about how can we accomplish all that with just the little bit of time we have and the resources we have. But I don't think we would be getting this project done, and we wouldn't have the collaboration we would have with our partners if we didn't bring in this one person dedicated to a very large project, and making sure that, I'll go back to my train metaphor, that all the trains are running on time and we keep on schedule.
Great. And Casey and Rachel, so the collaboration is between GBH and the Library of Congress. You guys want to talk about that? It's been 7 years in the making. And then also collaborating with all these other projects. What are your sort of oversights on those, and what works, what doesn't work?
Sure, I can start off. I came into this project in late 2015. So it was just about the time that the NewsHour project got awarded. So that was, it was a little bit of like being thrown into a lake and learning how to swim. And like you said before, Chris, it almost became, I remember there were days when we were emailing back and forth constantly. And with Casey, there's sort of like, I work for the library, but I also work on this project. And, there are times when I'm communicating more with the AAPB partners and collaborators than I am with my own coworkers at the library. And so, it's that communication is key. And I don't think the partnership with GBH has really been key too, because, the library has sort of the preservation expertise and the standards expertise and sort of this archiving, but GBH has really brought these partnerships in and can facilitate the access, which is really what makes this partnership work. It's one of the first type of projects that the library has really done, and I think it's been really successful too. When we give reports, all of the higher ups are always very impressed with the work we're doing and the amount of projects that we're running too. So that it's been really beneficial. It's been a learning experience. When I first started, I feel like I didn't know, I come from an archival background, but AV archiving isn't really taught in schools a lot. I feel like that's more of a learn on the job. And it was my first internship out of school was with an AV archive. And yeah, I've learned so much. Sometimes I look back at old correspondence and I'm like, oh, I've come so far in learning about this stuff. And I love to share it with others too. So, you know, every collaboration is an opportunity to pass on knowledge, to learn new things. And yeah, I love it. It's been very rewarding.
Casey.
Yeah, so on my end, I actually came into the project in October 2013, right after Karen and her counterpart, Alan Gevinson, had taken on stewardship of the AAPB from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And so working across these 4 projects, I've learned so much, starting out with the NewsHour project and then moving on to Riverside and now with New Mexico and Kansas. So I think we've learned a lot over the course of these projects and are just continuing to improve upon our workflows and our understanding about how to develop these projects in order to make them as successful as possible. So I appreciate you all for letting us partner with you and learn along the way. And with the partnership with the Library of Congress, I would say, you know, collaboration requires trust. It requires adaptability and understanding between very different organizations that have so many other things going on in addition to this initiative. And we both have our own visions for, you know, how the project should be undertaken and what our mission and priorities should be. And it's definitely been a great experience working alongside the library and developing shared goals that we're working towards. And I think it's only made us stronger in the end.
Great, thank you all. So I'm skipping around some of the questions that I had, but I guess I'd like that you all to comment on what's been really complicated and what's been really challenging, and what would you do differently, and how do you resolve those differences and challenges and issues that come up. I know Kansas and Michael, you're just launching, but even in the process of creating the project and the proposal, you know, what would you have done differently? What kind of hindsight do you have? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. I read through your initial questions and thought about it for a second. I was like, I just don't think. And then I went, oh, wait. There are, I think for us, the greatest challenge was the resources in putting together the grant. So we didn't have a grant department. We didn't have a grant writer. We didn't have anything. I didn't really understand the depth and breadth of this effort. And so y'all quickly helped put that in perspective. And so I realized we had to have a team of people for what we were going to try to accomplish. And this wasn't something I could do on my own on Saturday afternoons for a month. You know, that was not going to work. So it was one of the things that was absolutely critical that we have was the team. And something I came to realize later that might be useful for others in the future is sometimes I don't know that I was expressing the entire project well to our partners. And to me, the partners are the other stations in the project. And I think in hindsight, I would have actually I should have asked AAPB and the Library of Congress. I should have asked those of you who were walking me through it to walk them through it. And there's even a chance that you might have offered. And at the time I thought, oh, well, no. It just, it was harder. I thought I was doing a good job keeping it succinct, but it kind of turns out it needs more than that, because it is more than that. And so I think I would have organized something that would, so Zoom meetings weren't common at the time. And I thought it would have required flights and a lot of coordination across the state. And so it just wasn't in my mind an option, but as a Zoom meeting would be so simple to do. And then y'all could answer all those questions that I played middleman on. And I know through the deeds of gift process, there was some conversation, and I know there was some contact. Thank goodness. But I think I should have helped initiate that sooner with the partners, and that might have that might have eased some things that now might be, I think is I don't think anybody's afraid right now. That's not my point, but it's just like, wow, really is time. Now I have to see if you meant what you said, Debra, when you said you're bringing the resources. I don't have to. So that would be, in hindsight, that's the thing I think I should have done.
Who wants to go next?
Well, I'd like to jump in real quick. I remember looking at the CLIR application the first time, and I was like, uh-oh. I've written a lot of grants and raised money for projects, but this was something very different, very new for me, as again, I'm not an archivist. And there was a real learning curve here. And I think, as I said, without Karen and Casey's help, we would not have gotten through this. And we still wouldn't get through it. I mean, it's ongoing. It's just a constant process. And I hope by the time of end of 2 years, we feel confident that we've really accomplished what we set out to do. And I think we will. I have no doubt about that. But that teamwork, as Debra is referring to, is just essential all along the way. But that first couple months of grant writing was really an eye-opener, and it really helped me, especially when I started talking to other people like at EMEA, that this is kind of cutting-edge stuff. I really don't, and as Rachel was saying, there aren't really classes, there really isn't a lot of information out there for how to preserve this very fragile magnetic media. And it is very fragile. I'm always kind of incredulous. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a documentary, and it goes on a $20 videotape or a $50 hard drive. That still gets my attention. And I always think, all that work, all that effort, all those great stories really need to have a way to keep them relevant and available for the future. And that's what you're all doing here. And I think in my mind, it's very much a first step and a big learning curve for us, but I think you're really starting to do something that very, very much needs to be done nationwide.
Thank you. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Chris?
Sure, I'll weigh in on some challenges. I'd say the challenges, as I think through it, we're at the front end of the project and really toward the back end of that project, because we did work so well and collaboratively once we really got rolling. I think from our perspective, and I should say, I joined the NewsHour just about the time that this project was being launched. It had already been set, and we were just kind of off to the races when I joined. And I would say one of the biggest challenges for us is that and this happens so regularly with broadcast programs, particularly daily news programs that are live. Frankly, archives are not our focus. They should be. As a longtime television news archivist, I'm the one who's always saying it should be one of our focus. But we knew we had this collection, but we had a catastrophic failure of our database a couple of years before this. So we had lost a lot of really important information. We had this collection spread all over a lot of different places in a lot of different formats, as has been mentioned. And so I think one of those challenges was really understanding what we had and where. And I would say to anyone going forward, as much it's critical that there's a very clear understanding of what you have and where you have it and how easily you can get it. That might have helped all of us a little bit in the beginning, I'm sure there are some nods there because, yeah, that would have helped a lot. But we made up for a lot of that. Now, some of the challenges for us really come from kind of the what I've called ancillary blessings of this project, which have to do primarily with the digital files that we have been able to receive as part of this project. And those files are fantastic. They help us a great deal. They're very large files. The formats are very large. That was just kind of part of the deal. And that was because in the early days, we arranged for a format that did not match the asset management system that we happened to be launching at the same time. There was not a lot of communication between the folks who were working on this project and the folks that were working on this asset management project. And so it's a very long story, but we ended up with files that are beautiful, but they're very large and they take a lot to work with. And so we're finding now that we're in production with those. People want to use them all the time because we have them, but we need a little extra time to get them in the system and really be able to work with them. So I would say, it all comes down to planning and thinking these things through. But those big challenges had to do with what do we have, where is it, and then how are we as an institution going to bend our systems to be able to work effectively with the results of this kind of project. And that goes not just with production, but also with the significant increase in interest in our collection. I will tell you, our licensing and research department, they receive requests fourfold over what they used to in terms of interest in programming directly from folks who go to AAPB and are able to see this material. This was not material that was readily available to folks prior to this collection. It was all on tape in storage. So now folks can see it, work with it, they have transcripts. It's been a great thing. But those were the biggest challenges. The middle part, partnership, communication, those things really helped alleviate any big challenges through that middle. I don't know that the rest of this team would say that it alleviated the big challenges, but to our mind, that part was pretty straightforward, all having to do with your expertise, of course. But so.
Thank you. Vince, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I guess my answer really is that the whole story of this entire project has been challenges, but everything, there was just everything outside of the collaboration and the project itself. The project itself is fairly straightforward, and the collaboration has been, uniquely, I think, helpful, and just everything I need and every question I have is readily and quickly answered by either Rachel or Casey. But there's been just so many other. I actually started out as an intern helping to inventory the tapes while they were preparing this project, and then unfortunately the director of the archives at that time suffered a terrible accident and had to permanently retire. So then the project was delayed for a year. A new director of the archives was brought on, and she actually brought me in just for the day to sort of tell her about what had been going on with the project and try to update her a little bit about, where things were, what's going on with this project, what the tapes are, what they were looking for, these kinds of things. And I was still in library school at the time, but she actually asked me to come on and be the project manager because I was knowledgeable about the tapes and I'd had some education in library school, fortunately, in audio preservation. So that presented a humongous challenge of the two of us not even really knowing what the project was and not having been involved in writing the grant or anything like that. Just trying to get caught up into what this was and what we were doing. and it also presented a challenge of just this being a very new and young archive. Even just sort of some of our issues, some of our biggest challenges have just been working with other people in the church to try to either get them to understand what we're doing or try to get them to help us with things. Even just, some of my biggest challenges or my most frustrating days have been just trying to find a shipping pallet to send the tapes out, having to call someone and they have to call someone else and they have to radio a third person and they have to go down to the parking garage and dig around, and those sorts of little things that I think in a more established archive, where those sorts of processes would be either established or we would have these relationships and know who to go to for the things that we need, that wasn't there. So we were totally kind of starting from point zero and learning all these things as we went. And so really it was the collaboration with AAPB that was the sort of like lodestar guiding us through all of this other stuff that was just so daunting by comparison, because the project and the collaboration really was like fairly straightforward, fairly simple, and that guide that sort of let us get through everything. But the stuff actually at our institution was really the struggle that we had to get through, and so having Rachel and Casey there to guide us through this has just been, it would have been impossible without having them.
Well, you guys did have an amazing challenge right off the bat with the Ricky's accident. So,
well, hey,
yeah.
Karen, I wanted to jump in real quick. You're talking about challenges. One of the big challenges we had was on the administrative level here with the partnerships, and that rights and record keeping and revenue and all of those things are just a big part of the post of this project. And thinking about that, I'll make it real quick and just say our solution was to put everything in the public domain. And that was a huge step, and that actually was a great relief. It probably would have cost a lot more to have somebody on board keeping track of the revenue and the rights and all of that than any real revenue I think we would have been generating in this project. So that was a really big step for us.
Thank you. I don't want to cut Casey and Rachel short. If you guys have any poignant things, we are getting close to 45 minutes in time. Do you have any major points you want to make?
I just want to echo Michael's comment from earlier about how the importance of having like a full-time person at the location, managing the day-to-day processes of the project and keeping the train moving forward, I think has been a really big benefit over the course of what we've learned across all of these projects. So having that full-time project manager, project archivists, and also we mentioned earlier Miranda and Rebecca, but we also have other staff at the AAPB who work on these projects, and Miranda at GBH has played a huge role in and will continue to play a huge role across the New Mexico and Kansas projects in ensuring that materials are received at the AAPB, that they make it online, and that we've been able to verify all the metadata once it's received. So the staffing, I think, is really key.
Yeah, and I want to say Alan at the library too has been fabulous in terms of making sure all the key historical moments are pointed and making sure whatever we need from the library gets pushed through. And so he's not on the call at the moment, but kudos to Alan too.
I guess, yeah, just kind of echoing what everyone's said. I know having that point person there is really key. And I think too, one thing I've learned, because I know, Chris, you kind of touched on this, the size of the preservation files, and they're a little unwieldy to work with. So I've kind of learned, like, towards the front of a project, especially for project partners that may be completely new to preservation, just sort of laying out like the difference between a preservation file, an access file, and sort of a production file that falls in between, and kind of like how, what the library can supply and what they should have on hand, and that type of thing, just to sort of make sure everyone's on the same page. Because I think there's been some projects where that's not been entirely clear. And also like at the library, we've got, you know, we have a video lab supervisor, we have IT people who are really have spent their careers working with this type of media, developing the standards that are now used for preservation files. So their expertise really has been invaluable to me too, to make this work. So yeah, it's all a collaborative effort. I don't think any one of us could do this on our own.
Well, thank you guys so much. I actually want to add one thing at the end, which is that my observations and what I have found is that all of you guys being so involved and so passionate about these projects is what really made them happen. And, you know, it's what's made the collaborations work. It's what's made the projects move through. And I think I have found that it takes at least one person at all these organizations to have that passion and to really push it along. And I want to thank you all of you, for really making that happen and making the AAPB such a fun project to work on and such a rewarding project to work on. So thank you so much.